All right, so hi everyone. My name is Angel Gomez. Like I said, I am the program manager for the harm reduction team here at AIDS United. And my goal is to help you through the application process in whatever ways I can. This will be the 15th round of the Harm Reduction Futures Fund, which was formerly known as the Syringe Access Fund. And I'm very excited to be able to continue this. Important and critical initiative. So also, if you all forgive me, I am flying solo today, so I will be pausing to admit people to the room. Let's see. So this will be recorded and we will post it for all to view, and I will also email it to everybody who has registered for this. So you can refer to this in the future. Again, if you could please mute your mics so that we can get the best recording possible. And you can put your questions in the Q&A or the chat. And again, I am flying solo today, so I will come back to the chat towards the end and answer any questions. And if you put a question in the chat and I happen to miss it, please flag that. I don't want to miss any questions. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, I'm just going to give you a little overview of AIDS United, and we'll talk about the Harm Reduction Futures Fund, the eligibility and grant requirements, and we'll go over how to apply, the attachments, and then also the timeline, and then I'll have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. So AIDS United is a national nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to end the HIV epidemic in the United States through strategic grant making, capacity building, technical assistance, and policy and advocacy. At AIDS United, we lead the charge for responsive and effective federal, state, and local policies that benefit people living with and at risk for HIV. We invest in innovative models to meet the needs of communities affected by HIV and AIDS. We have given more than 1.3 million in direct funding and leveraged 160 million to increase capacity of communities and organizations responding to HIV in the US. We inform the field with best practices and lesson learned. And we work within a social justice framework that challenges the foundational issues of racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia, socioeconomic inequity, gender discrimination, and stigma. So for the Harm Reduction Futures Fund, we have been managing this fund for over 20 years. And the purpose of it is the ability, we fund programs that have the ability to provide high quality syringe services to one or more identified communities. And we also fund organizations that have the ability to conduct local, statewide, or national level policy and advocacy initiatives that demonstrate concrete objectives and activities to expand access to sterile syringes. So we have 3 funding categories that organizations can apply for. You are only allowed to apply under one category. You cannot submit multiple applications. Those categories are the syringe access direct services. And so those are for programs that provide direct services to individuals, and you must provide syringes. The second category is what we call the multi-program direct service support. And so this is for larger harm reduction organizations that support multiple smaller organizations that are providing direct services. So while the ultimate recipient doesn't have to provide syringes, everyone that they support with this fund must provide syringes. I will note this does not count if you are trying to get funding for your own organization for multiple of your own programs. This is if you support several other programs. And the best example of this that many people are familiar with is Next Distro. They work with organizations all over the United States. And this would be an example of what a multi-program direct services support looks like. The third and final category is for advocacy. And this is for harm reduction organizations. Again, it doesn't have to be an organization that provides syringes, but the activities that they are applying for funding must focus on legalizing or strengthening syringe service programs and other health interventions for people who use drugs at the local, state, and federal levels. So to be eligible for this grant, applicants must meet one or both of the following criteria. And if you are applying for the multi-program support, the ultimate beneficiaries of this grant must meet the criteria below. So that's racial equity and applicant organizations. This means, organizations that are led by and serving a majority people of color. It's important to note that it's led and serving. It's not one or the other. AIDS United has a definition of what BIPOC-led and serving organization means. And we recognize that this definition is imperfect, but we are committed to continued learning and updating our language and being cognizant in the ways in which race and power operate. So the definition that we are currently operating under is for organizational leadership that is self-identified Black, Indigenous, and people of color executive directors or highest paid staff or equivalent. It must be at least 51% identified as BIPOC, and the same goes for your senior leadership, as well as the rest of the staff. So your entire staff must be 51% or more BIPOC, and that is self-identified. So whatever that individual identifies as, we do not set specific definitions for what that might mean. And the same goes for serving. It must be 51% or more of the participants who self-identify as BIPOC. We also understand that many of you do not collect that information on your participants, which is fine. We ask that you give us your best estimate based on your observations. And if you have any questions about that's what the BIPOC means, which is what I get most of the questions about, feel free to put it into the chat. The other area that you can qualify for is what we call areas of high need and low resource. And so this is organizations that work in a place where there's prohibitive laws or restrictions on SSPs. There's not a lot of resources or funding. For example, not having access to state or local resources. And we kind of leave this definition a little bit more vague because what high need and low resource can change from area to area. And what is considered high need, low resource in Montana is not what you would consider the same as high need, low resource in West Virginia. And so there is space on the application to justify why you fit this category. And then the other qualifications is you must have a budget of less than 1.5 million. And this is your annual organizational budget. This is for the whole organization, not just your syringe service program. So if you are a larger organization that operates a bunch of different things, we are looking for the entire organization. If you are using a fiscal sponsor, do not use the fiscal sponsor's budget. Use your own organization's budget to determine eligibility. So you must be located in the United States and any of its territories. This includes reservations, tribal lands, Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, the Northern Marina Islands, and the District of Columbia. Applicants must be a nonprofit tax-exempt organization or fiscally sponsored by one. We do make exceptions for health departments and tribal governments on a case-by-case basis. Oftentimes they do not meet the budget cap, but we can make exceptions, especially if the health department is the only SSP for many miles. It's the only way that folks can access things. We will consider that differently. So if you are a health department and you are considering applying for this, please make sure in the high need, low resource area of the application that you justify why we should consider you. And tribal organizations are welcome to apply. They do not need to justify why their budget may be higher, as long as we have an understanding of the services that you're offering, and why certain exceptions might be made on that top budget cap. So financial stability, organizations should be fiscally stable and viable prior to the submission of funding of the application. And what that means is organizations should have the financial ability to operate for the duration of the grant period, which is a full year. Again, you have to submit only to one of the funding categories: direct services, multi-program support, and advocacy. And you must be able to utilize the fund within the 12-month grant period, which begins February 1st, 2025, and ends January 31st, 2026. So a few logistics on the application. There are 2 required narrative questions, which are tell us a little bit about your organization and also provide us with a description of the project that you're applying for funding. And both of those questions have a 250-word limit. If you are applying as a high need, low resourced organization, the description of why you fit that category has a 150-word limit. If you are applying as that high need, low resourced, or you're applying as both high need, low resourced and a BIPOC led and serving organization, please make sure you fill out that description of why you are high need, low resource. If you do not complete it, we might just reject the application because we would have no idea why you meet one of those 2 qualifications. So please, please, please complete that question. Make sure you're clear and thorough in your responses. Try and anticipate any questions the review committee might have, and don't assume that they know anything about your organization. All of the Harm Reduction Futures Fund applications are reviewed by an external review committee made up of folks working in syringe service programs and experienced in syringe service programs. So just because I may know your organization and understand all of your projects and what you all do does not mean that our reviewers do. So make sure that you're clear in those responses. The application and all materials must be submitted through our grant portal and are due no later than August 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And all components are submitted. If the application is missing any pieces, it will be deemed incomplete and will not be considered for a grant award. So please make sure you have that all completed before you hit that submit button. All right, so for the attachments for the pre-application, we only have one attachment that you need to provide, and that is our representation table. You can download that table in the request for pre-applications. Please make sure you complete the whole thing. Do not skip parts and read those instructions. I am going to pull it up on screen and kind of briefly go over it with you. Filling out this representation table is extremely important. This helps us determine the BIPOC-led and serving organizations. And even if you do not apply as a BIPOC-led and serving organization, you still need to complete this. This is an AIDS United wide requirement. We require this for all of our grant applications. So this is our representation table. Can everybody see that okay? Someone can give me just a thumbs up. Great, thank you. So this first page just has some of the instructions and some notes about how to fill out different fields. And then we also have some definitions of different words here. If you have any questions on completing this representation table, please reach out to me and I can support that individually. So when you go to your second tab down here, this is where we complete things. It is very important that you fill out every piece. So up at the top, we have the agency name, who completed this, the date, your total number of staff, and your total number of board members. And so all of the light purple are boxes that you are going to fill out, and the dark purple are going to automatically calculate. So you can see here, when I enter in 15, it auto-populates your total number of board members over here to 15. And so for this top section of board members, we're going to want just the number that self-identify as these different categories. And so as you complete this, you will see that over here, the total number is adding up, and we will check to make sure that this total matches this total. And you must do this for race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, HIV status, and age. The same for your staff members. So these light purple in the executive staff or senior management, you will add in the total number that you have in the light purple, and then enter in who identifies where. And if you are an all volunteer organization, please do include your volunteers in this as best you can, especially those that are taking those more leadership staff equivalent roles. If you utilize volunteers and you have staff, please only include the staff in this section. And then very important, this bottom row down here is for the people that you serve. And we ask for percentages, not exact numbers. Again, use your best guess if you do not collect that information. And so here you will fill out, and you can see it starts to automatically put in the percentage, and it will add up and make sure for each category, it adds up to 100. And then down here at the bottom, we have a couple of questions. You do not need to go into extreme detail in this. Just provide us enough so we can have the question answered. If you don't feel like you have, for example, any challenges on collecting this data, you can simply answer, we did not experience any challenges. This is also a great opportunity. If you do not collect some of this data, for example, if you do not collect like the sexuality of your staff members, or they don't disclose those sorts of things, you can put that in the other category, and then you can specify here that you don't collect that data from your staff. Again, please make sure you answer all of these questions to the best of your ability. An incomplete representation table could mean that your application is disqualified. So the grant application, if you need support with the actual application, please reach out to grants@aidsunited.org. If you can, include the web browser, what happened and if possible, a screenshot. Please do not hesitate to reach out about that. And I will real quickly pull up our application so you can see that there is a link in the RFP. I apologize because it is not wanting to move over screens for me. So I'm going to stop sharing, switch screens for you. Okay, so this is the application form. You can save your progress by clicking this box up here. And you enter in an email and you make a password. This email and password will only work for this application. If you want to log back in and restart your saved application, hit resume from a previously saved. It'll take you to a new page to enter in that email and password. And so as you scroll down, you can see that some of them have red stars. That means it's required. Other ones do not have red stars, and that means it's not required. I will note that you do have to enter in your EIN. The reason we don't have it required here is because if you are a fiscal sponsor, you will scroll down and it'll ask you for that EIN. And so we ask that you fill out either your organization's EIN here or your fiscal sponsors when you select that. You can put in your organization's website. If you don't have a website and you only have like Facebook or Instagram, feel free to enter that instead. This is not required. We know a lot of syringe service programs do not have those sorts of things, especially our smaller organizations and underground. But please do fill out all of the stuff here. We'll need that primary contact. This is the person that we're gonna email about if your application's been invited to submit a full application, if we have questions about your application. So please make sure that you put in an email and phone number of someone that we can reach and can answer all of these questions. We have a similar question here. This is a standard for all of our applications at AIDS United, and it is about your leadership. And if they identify as any of these categories, and again, it has to be 51% or more of all of the conditions. So all of your leadership staff, whether that's executive director or your highest paid staff, and also your senior leadership and just your staff as well, 51% or more. And this is just a yes, no, unsure. For each of these categories. We also have an option for you to enter in other relevant experience. So you can hit yes here and enter in what that relevant experience is. Here's where you put your organizational annual budget. And if you have any conflict of interest, so if anyone in your organization is an employee, or has a relationship with AIDS United, is on our board of directors, our board of trustees, or a member of our public policy council. This does not disqualify you from applying. This is just our conflict of interest disclosure. And then here is where you mark if you use a fiscal sponsor, and if you mark that, you can see it'll ask for the organizational information of your fiscal sponsor, as well as a primary contact for them. Your groups that you reach, and so this is who your organization and your project is designed to reach, and so you will select from here the people that you reach, and you can add as many of these as you want. You can you select right here to add another group, and you can keep going until you have added every group that you reach. And then, so your geographic region, where you operate, so you can select urban, and if you operate in multiple areas, again, you can select here to add another geographic region, and you can select all that apply, and your geographic scope. So if you provide services local, statewide, regional, or national, Again, you can select multiple by just selecting add another, and then describe your location. This is just meant to be a briefer description. So like if you had selected regional, you can put in you can put in maybe the 3 counties that you serve. If you selected up here, reservation, you can put in the name of the reservation that you serve. And then services, so what services or programming will be supported. So this is specifically with the funds that you're applying for, not what your organization does in general. And so you can select here, and then again, you can add as many services as you need. And then here we have your project title, the total funding amount that you request. And you can see down here, we have what the funding minimum and maximum for each category is. And so please do not apply for below or above what the minimum and maximum for the category you're applying for direct services. That's 10,000 to 25,000. For the multi-program support, that's 25,000 to 40,000. And for advocacy, it is 10,000 to 25,000. Here, you will mark if you are a syringe service program, yes or no. And then you select that category that you are applying for. So direct services, multi-program support, or advocacy. And then you can select your eligibility requirements. You can select one or both. And then we ask a little bit about your organization. If you're all volunteer-led, an SSP with a 1-to-1 exchange, a SSP with a 1-to-1 plus, or needs-based with some restrictions, or if you are an SSP that is needs-based, or if you're an underground SSP, you can also select none of the above. If you are a SSP with 1-to-1 exchange, or a 1-to-1 plus, or needs-based with restrictions, please do provide us a little bit of information about why your organization uses that model. Whether it just has to be a sentence or so to let us know if this is based off local laws, agency restrictions, just whatever reason, if you have financial restrictions of why you choose those models. And then here is where you put in the brief description of your organization. You have 250 words. It lets you know down at the bottom how many you have remaining of that 250. This is where we ask for that brief description of your proposed project. Again, 250 word limit, and it lets you know how many you have remaining. And then this is optional, but if you are applying as high need, low resource, or both, it is required. And then this is where you upload the representation table. You can download it by clicking this link. And then once you complete that and save it, you can upload your file here. And then you can hit submit. And this will submit your application fully. You cannot go back and edit. It takes you to another page to say, are you sure? But if you want to hold this, come back later and edit, make sure you click that Save My Progress. Right. Okay. So our timeline, the request for pre-applications went out on August 1st. We're having our TA webinar today. Applications are due August 22nd, 5 p.m. Eastern time. We will notify if you are invited to apply for a full application or if you are declined on September 20th. Please do not reach out beforehand and ask about the status of your application. If for any reason that notification is going to be delayed past September 20th, I will email everyone and let them know. Full proposals are due October 24th, and we will have that final funding decision on December 18th. with the grant period beginning February 1st, 2025 and ending January 31st, 2026. So for our pre-application, we still have available one-on-one office hours where you can schedule 15 minutes with me to ask questions. These are the remaining times. There is a link to sign up for those in the request for pre-applications. If you don't have, if any of the available times don't work for you, please reach out to me and let me know if sometimes that do work and I can see what we can schedule. Or if they fill up, I may add additional days and times to that link as well. All right, so now we're gonna have time for questions. Here is my info up here. You can email either of the Harm Reduction at AIDS United or a Gomez@AIDSUnited.org. Both emails come to me. So feel free to use either. I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat and answer some of these questions. So the first question, is it possible for a city-run agency to apply? Yes, it is possible for a government agency like a health department or city-run or county-run to apply. You should put in the high need, low resource description of why your organization is applying. As a health department, we often find that health departments are over our $1.5 million budget cap. But like I said, we might make exceptions based on where your organization is. And we understand there's a lot of nuance in syringe service programs all over the United States. And so we try and take all of that into account. When we ask for, let's see, I have a question about annual budgets. We want your current fiscal year, the one you are operating in. If you are only, let's see, some folks just began their fiscal year on July 1st and may not have their budget all worked out. That is fine. Give us your most current fiscal year budget that you have. It doesn't have to be what you filed in your taxes, just what you're currently operating off of. If we invite you to submit a full application, we will ask for your most recent tax filings. I see a question, how do we define underground? Basically, underground is an organization that isn't legally sanctioned, whether that be by however their locality defines sanctioned. So, for example, if you operate in California, but you are a state authorized program, you would not be underground. And we are not concerned about the laws in your area. We are strictly here to fund syringe service programs. So if you have questions specifically about that, and you don't want to put it in the full chat for everyone, feel free to email me. We don't disclose any information about who applies. And if you are awarded the grant, we will only disclose that you are awarded if you opt into us making that public. Yes, the representation table attachment is separate from the questions built into the online organizational leadership. We ask some different things about that organizational leadership that we don't ask in the representation table. Because there are questions like if you are sex worker led or drug user led in that built-in section. Can funds be used to support staffing such as a peer professional? Yes, funds can be used for whatever you want to propose it for. We do not have any restrictions on what funds can be used for. I will say this is a highly competitive grant. We anticipate no more than 15 grants being awarded, And for the past few years, I've received about 80 applications. So we try and prioritize where our funds are going to make the biggest impact. And while we will fund more than just purchasing of syringes, that is often the priority. But in the past, we have funded organizations to pay stipends to their participants who do secondary. We funded the purchase of a vehicle for outreach. We funded the first staff positions for an organization. We really don't try to define what your need is and instead have you tell us. So if your org does not have ongoing funding, can we still apply? Yes, we frequently will fund organizations who have just started, who maybe don't have the same funding sources that they used to. It is actually very common that we'll fund organizations in their first year or two, so they don't have a lot of funding coming in. I myself started a syringe service program, and this was the very first grant that we ever received, and we were not receiving any funding prior to that. Let's see. Next question. I see, so circling back to EIN number, we have our own EIN as an LLC, and we are applying using our fiscal sponsorship EIN. You should be putting the fiscal sponsor 501c3. We cannot fund LLCs. So if you use your LLC EIN, it'll automatically reject your application. Let's see, we have a horizontal organization structure and no formal or traditional board. Should we use our fiscal sponsors, board members, and representation? This one can be a little tricky. I understand not all SSPs have the traditional structure. For your horizontal organization structure, you can just choose to include them all in leadership staff or staff, however you choose, and fill them all in one line. And again, you can put in those narrative questions on the representation table that you have that horizontal organizational structure. And it is up to you if you want to include your fiscal sponsors board members, and you can also put a note at the bottom that it's your fiscal sponsors board members and you don't have any control over who is on that board. Some organizations in the past that have fiscal sponsors still have an entity that kind of operates like a board of directors or as a community advisory board, and they have used those in place. Feel free to do so if you want a little bit more specific guidance, because this can change from organization to organization. I'd recommend sending me an email or setting up a time for us to chat. Do you consider people in recovery from substance use disorder as people who use drugs? We ask if it's current people who use drugs or if they have had lived experience. We don't, so we count them as two separate ways. Because oftentimes when you're in recovery, the further away from your drug use that you get, you oftentimes don't have the same sort of connection to community as somebody who is currently using drugs, but your experience is still valid and helpful. So we just have them as two separate identities. Great. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I think I got through all the questions in the chat. You are welcome to put more questions in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand, and I can answer them for you. Okay, let's see. Is this a reimbursement grant? No, this is not a reimbursement grant. You receive the first half as soon as we have all of the paperwork and agreements signed. And then you receive your second half of the payment once you complete your 6-month reporting. So it is not reimbursement. Again, feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. All right, if we don't have any other questions, we can end a little early. I will put my email back up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have. I want to support you the best I can with completing this application. So feel free to ask me any questions. Oh, here we go. What if you have not filed taxes yet, as it's your first year? That is fine. If you are invited to submit a full application, you can just submit a brief letter of explanation of why you don't have tax filings in place of that. It is not an issue. Like I said, we fund organizations that are in their first year or so frequently, and so they do not have tax filings. All right, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy this extra 15 minutes we got back.